Let's talk about overcoming obstacles in the closing process. We always want a smooth transaction, right? But invariably, when things are going along too smoothly, there's going to be a hiccup in the road. So, I'm going to talk to you about three things that could possibly be a hiccup for you in the closing process and then how we work to overcome those. The first one is last minute financing issues. And I can't tell you how many heated conversations I have had with sellers because it's 10 days before closing and all of a sudden there's an issue with the buyer's financing. And sellers are like, I thought they were pre qualified. I thought they were pre approved. How can this happen? How can they tell us they qualified to buy the house and now they don't? Well, because buyers do things that they shouldn't do. And sometimes it's not the buyer's fault, let me say that. But a lot of times, maybe a buyer has took out a new credit card. That's obviously going to affect their debt ratio. Or maybe the credit pull that happened when they got that new credit card has dropped their credit score. Because lenders these days do monitor your credit during the whole application process. So they are aware of any credit pulls that happen on your credit. They are aware of any new accounts that you open. You're not going to hide that from anybody. So sometimes it's because the buyer takes out a new credit card. Sometimes it's because the buyer does a boneheaded thing like buys a new vehicle. And that is a deal killer 9 times out of 10. Sometimes the buyer takes a new job. They're just not thinking. They're like, well, this is better for me than where I was. I'm going to be making more money. Well, now we have to delay the close because the lender needs to get new income verification from the buyer. They need to see those pay stubs for at least 2 weeks, showing the buyer is going to make more money than they were at the last job. So there's all kinds of things that can happen last minute that have to do with the financing. Sometimes a buyer might get fired from their job or laid off from their job. That's obviously not the buyer's fault. It's definitely going to cause a hiccup for you if you're on the selling side of the house. Another thing that can happen is you have a title issue. These are a little more rare, but on occasion we do have title issues where 20 years ago there was a deed of trust recorded and there's no release that's ever been found. A lot of times that can be handled fairly quickly, but depending on when it's discovered, it may cause a hang up in the closing. Sometimes you may have a boundary dispute. If a property has acreage, especially if there is not a recent survey that's been done and the legal description is kind of vague on what the actual metes and bounds are, the title company may say, hey, you're going to have to get a survey on this property so we have a good legal description to ensure. That's going to cause a hiccup and a delay because surveyors are backed up right now. You're not going to call a surveyor and get a survey back in a week to 10 days. You're looking at probably 30 to 60 days to get that survey back. The last thing that can cause a hiccup is the appraisal. Typically, we should have an appraisal back at least 2 weeks before the close date. Sometimes they get pushed for whatever reason, and we don't get them back until closer to closing. But if the appraised value comes in less than the purchase price, then we're going to have to look at a couple of different options to keep the deal working. A lot of times, if it's within $10,000, everybody gives a little and we can meet in the middle. But I have had appraisals that come in $100,000 short, and we've had to contest those appraisals, which takes time. So those are some common obstacles that you're going to run into in the closing process. But I'm also going to share with you 3 tips to help ensure a smooth closing. The first is to have open communication. Whenever we go under contract, I want to stay in touch with that buyer's agent. I want to stay in touch with the lender directly. I want them communicating with me where we're at, what's going on, so that I can keep you as my seller informed about that. I will keep you updated. When we know when the home inspection is, I'll let you know. When we know when the appraisal is going to be, I will let you know. We try to keep you updated on a weekly basis just so you're aware of where we're at in this process. The second thing is to thoroughly be prepared for all things. So when I list a house, I give my sellers a little checklist of, hey, these are items the home inspector is going to look at. So if you want to take the time to kind of check some of these things out yourself, and if there's an issue, go ahead and repair it before we get the inspection done. Then, when we get to the appraisal part, I try to prepare a packet for the appraiser, and I show them the comps that I use to determine the list price. If we're in a multiple offer situation, I include a copy of all those offers so they can see there was a bidding war on that particular house. The last thing is flexibility and problem solving. When you hire the right agent, we're going to understand when you get heated with us because something's happened last minute. And it takes a few years, I think, for agents to truly be able to listen to that. I used to get right back with people, and now when I have a seller who's upset, I just let them vent. I understand you're frustrated, especially if you're trying to get this house sold and closed on a certain date so that you can buy another house somewhere else. And I've just learned that the best thing to do is to let that seller have their say. Let everybody get it out, and then let's look at what are the solutions that we can do to help keep this deal moving forward. Somebody has to be level-headed. That's why you're hiring an agent, because we are a third party. We are removed directly from the transaction, and we're going to help you keep a level head to get you to the closing table. So that's why it's very important that as a seller, you're working with an experienced agent, because we're going to look for red flags that could pop up, and we're going to figure out a way to overcome any obstacles in the transaction.